So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about Man, let's go. It's go time, baby.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You ready to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Defense trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Can't chase it. What a catch! Jackson Smith and Are you kidding me? Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts Ryan and Bryce.
Dayna O'Gorman joins us again on the show, back at it for a crazy last, 72 hours. Dayna's an NFL writer and a member of Our Turf Football. Dayna, we appreciate you coming on the show during this wild time here for the Seahawks.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's, over on Our Turf, we talk about all 32 teams. So sometimes it's nice to focus in a little bit, but it's been crazy all over the league. It's just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it has been, but I mean, the Seahawks are really getting some national attention because, two names, in particular, national guys, especially, DK Metcalf being on the move and, our starting quarterback for the last few seasons, Geno Smith, the release of Lockett. So, a lot of news buzzing nationally, but for the Hawks, offensively, just a huge turnover. We're going to have a whole new looking offense for the most part, receiver, quarterback. What were your reactions to the DK and Geno news? Were you surprised at either of them? And are you kind of happy the direction right now with the team?
Defensively, I'm thrilled. Let's just put it that way. I love who they've re-signed. I love they're bringing back their guys. I really like Ernest, and so I'm so excited he's back for sure. So defensively, yeah, totally good. Going clear back to the Kubiak hiring, I was like, and nothing against Kubiak. He's going to be very good at his job, right? Like that's no question there. He is a professional. He's done it before. I get all of that. I just was looking for something for a little more spark. I've been kind of picking on our head coach, but he's just kind of bland. And I was like, oh, we're going to get someone with the spark. But we didn't. But that's okay. The logic of it is so sound. So I'm really totally good with that. And I think that his system will work well here. Then it came down to DK and the whole DK Geno thing that just kind of went boom, boom right together. I was not surprised DK wanted out after last season and his production was down. And I just felt like he wasn't getting the opportunities that he deserved. And I will say this with all sincerity. I like DK. I like players with attitude. I like players with personality. That's why I love Richard Sherman, even though he drives everyone crazy. I loved him as a player. I like those kind of players, the LOB players. I like head coaches like that too. But at the same time, when you're the only one and then you're disrupting everything that's going on, might not be the best fit, right? And so I was not surprised that he wanted to go. I was not surprised that they let him go. I don't think that was their plan. I know Geno for sure was not in their plan to let Geno go. But I don't think it's going to be a bad thing for DK or for the Seahawks to let him have moved on. So I was really okay with that. The Geno thing bothered me a little bit, and that was for two reasons. Number one, it was because they talked so much about how important he was to this team. Kubiak said he came here because he wanted to coach Geno. They played Geno up so much. There's been conflicting reports that they offered $10 million less than the Raiders did. The other report says, no, they offered the exact same amount of money with a little bit of difference in guarantees. And he decided to go. And that once a player makes that decision, I don't think there's much you can do to fix that unless you're Myles Garrett and you throw a ton of money at him, right? And so I think that was probably best for him too. Plus, we need to remember how important Pete Carroll was to Geno Smith. And when Pete says, I'm going to pay you what they're going to pay you, but I want you to come play for me, don't blame him. I don't blame him for going. I think he would have happily stayed in Seattle had he not gotten that other offer. But I think the draw of playing for Pete for the same money was just too much for him. And that's okay with me. I just want Geno to win. I want him to feel like he's valued. I really like Geno. And I love that story arc. Now, there's been a lot of things that have come out in the last couple of days. Oh, he was a bit of a diva. Oh, he was this. That irritates me because I don't think that while it could be true, he's a quarterback. Hello, they all are kind of like that. But at the same time, I don't like that. I hate that taste in my mouth because I think that what he did here was really impressive and really good. And I'm very also at the same time excited for he and Pete to be reunited on the other side.
It's interesting, Dana, because I really do believe Geno's still the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks if Pete Carroll's not in the NFL.
100%.
Pete Carroll changed the entirety of, I feel, Geno's outlook on this offseason, being in a contract year, having to go through it. Well, do I really want to go through this? Because from what you've seen in reports, like you said, there was no counteroffer really kind of back from Geno's group. Once they made their initial, it just didn't fly. And I think, again, it came down to, like you said, they talked Geno up so much at the scouting combine. You heard both Mike and John say, we love Geno. I expect Geno to be our starter. He's going to be our week 1 starter. And then to have this drastic pivot, I think a lot of it came down to, like you said, I want to go and play for the guy that believed in me from the start.
Absolutely.
And I think part of it goes back to even like last offseason. Geno was under contract. But who were they talking up the most at points? John, Grubb, Mike McDonald, Drew Lock. You kept hearing Drew Lock's name, and he wasn't even under contract. It's like, why are we talking about the guy that's going to test free agency, like instead of the guy that's in our own building? And players don't tend to forget those things. And I think for Geno, it was, hey, I can go to the guy that's always believed in me from when I was the backup to when I became the starter. Like, I'm his guy, and I'm happy Geno's going to get to go play somewhere that he feels he's maybe going to be more appreciated than he was here. He was a very polarizing player for the Seahawk fan base. Me and Ryan used to go back and forth on different things at different points about Geno and the state of the franchise with him. The DK side of things for me, I felt the same way you did. DK wanted somewhere where he was going to be the focal point, the fixture of the offense. It was going to go through DK, and he gets to do that. Plus, he might get the chance to play with his buddy Russ again, which I think is a potential selling feature for him in some ways that now he's in Pittsburgh. I will say, though, like, I like guys with attitude. I would not, however, have been willing to pay the number that the Steelers played in a contract.
Agreed, completely.
You look at the history of receivers that are built like DK and how they've aged. Julio Jones is one of them that comes to mind for me, and some of these other guys. His physical abilities are what make him special, and if those start to go away, he doesn't all of a sudden become an elite route runner. That's just not in DK's game. And as you age and your athletic abilities decline, those become an issue. And so, like, you think when he finishes his contract, he'll be 32 years old. That's a lot of money to have wrapped up in a player like that. So I'm happy he's getting his pay. I'm just happy it's not coming out of Seattle's cap.
Right. I'm always go get your money. This is a not for long league. Get your money. And that has been an issue for Seattle as of late, is they're not wanting to pay that money, and so understandably, to somebody, I don't understand it, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I think that they've been pretty good at seeing that future just a little bit with some of those guys, not all of them, but some. And I think that this was just, they were like, this is not going to fit with us. And so we're going to let you go somewhere else. And I think that was probably the best for all of them, because there didn't seem to be much like animosity. It's not like, when Russ left, and it was just kind of gross. It was just like, I want out, we're going to let you out, and thanks for your time. And that's okay.
Do you think as far as DK is concerned, we talk about Pete Carroll, we talk about Geno going over to play with Pete because he loved playing with Pete. A lot of guys love playing with Pete. He's that player's coach guy, right? Even though the message might have got stale in Seattle the last few years, he doesn't mean players don't like him, right? So DK played with Pete for most of his career. Do you think the change of coaching swayed his wanting to maybe go somewhere? You talk about the frustration with Grubb and Waldron and stuff, but do you think he was just like, look, man, like, I'm frustrated. Mike McDonald, yeah, he's okay. Like you said, I know we had you on the last pod, and you're like, yeah, I like him, but I'm going to give it some time to see what he's like in the locker room with the guys. We don't know that. There's two guys that, now I'm not saying anything right now, but two guys that sort of wanted out. We kind of heard like the number was thrown out. There was no counter.
Right.
I mean, do you think that played a role? Like, if Pete was here, they're Seahawks.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. But I don't I don't think Pete had a lot to do with DK. Definitely with Geno, 1,000%. I think that's what it was completely. But the interesting thing, I think and I have really warmed to Mike McDonald. I told this story earlier tonight. I'll tell it here. At the combine, we get to do the coaches interviews. And so he walked out and he laughed. And he looked around. He goes, "We flew 2,000 miles, stuck to the same people," because it was all the Seahawks beat writers that were around there. But it was just very lighthearted. And I hadn't really seen that from him before. And so it was very easy. And so I'm like, okay, I get it. There's something here for me because I am used to a gregarious head coach, right? And so I really have warmed up to him over the last year, and I really love what he's done with defense. But I'm wondering a little bit, and I'll get murdered for this by other people, but the defense loves him. I wonder if he just never connected with the offense. And that was, he had a lot to fix on the defense. Let's give him that, right? And so I get that a little bit, but I wonder if there just isn't quite the same connection on that side. And so he's working into that. And, he left that to Grubb. That's your deal, right? Sort of thing. We don't know because we're not in those meetings. But at the same time, I wonder that since it was two offensive players that both wanted to go, and yet the defense is re-signing as fast as they can. So I think that that's a little interesting. But I also think that's a good lesson, right? The other thing we need to look at was DK over John Schneider? Did he not trust where he was taking the team? Did he not trust that? Or did he not trust that he could fix it to where DK could get the most out of his playing time, which is fair as a player? You need to maximize that, right? And so I think that might have had a lot more to do with it. I think the players in general like Mike McDonald. I'm not saying he's not likable. I'm just wondering if the connection wasn't quite as deep as maybe some of the players had, the defensive side instead of the offensive side, maybe. But again, we're just speculating, so.
The one speculation I also find, Dana, kind of plays off of what you're talking about there with Mike versus Pete and the connection. 3 of the guys that are now gone on offense, Tyler, who was cut, which we all kind of knew was coming last year to this year. We kind of had to figure that it was going to happen. But with DK and Geno, 2 of them were beloved by Pete, and Pete loved them. And part of me wonders, and again, it's speculation, on whether or not it made it easier for them to make the decision for both players to go, okay, we're not happy here, we're out.
Yeah.
Because maybe they're not even happy with the way they may like Mike, but Mike's way of doing things isn't the way they're comfortable with it because they had maybe like DK for an example. Like Pete loved DK's ability to be DK, which was he was okay with some of the penalties DK would take and that side of him. DK really bottled that up this year. You could tell at points it drove him nuts. He wanted to break out. We saw the one little outburst that they got in the San Francisco game where he was on the headset with Mike McDonald or with Ryan Grubb.
Mm-hmm.
But
love the headset.
Yeah, but that's something we didn't see a lot of from DK this year. That's like the one maybe moment that you really saw where we were accustomed to those like one every couple of weeks. DK was going to have a moment like that, whether it was, suplexing Fred Warner or, shoving some guy away. Like those were the type of things that you got accustomed to. So then to not see it, because Mike McDonald was very much the stay in kind of regiment, go this way. And that's his background with the Harbaughs. It's a very similar mindset. That's where I wonder when it came down to push comes to shove, did both Geno and DK look and go, hey, if we want to play out the rest of our careers, let's go play somewhere where, in Geno's case, I get to go play with the guy that's always loved me, and DK can go, hey, I can go chase my bag of money, maybe play with Russ again and go have some fun while I do it.
I don't know that Russ was a big part of it. I know they're very close friends, but at the same time, there's no guarantee Russ is going to be in Pittsburgh. I mean, the longer this plays out, there's a bigger possibility that they didn't get some of those other quarterbacks. But to be honest with you, I still think he makes way more sense in New York, but that's a whole different conversation. That's a free agency draft conversation. But so I don't know that that's it. But what I do know is when your comfort level is gone and your normalcy, what you know is normal, is gone, and you're fine but not exceeding or excelling there, then yeah, go find somewhere else. And we've seen other players, they do well with other teams, and maybe that's just what they need. So
talking about the first wave of free agency here, moving past Geno Smith, it didn't take long for them to sign their next guy. Sam Darnold, that was on everybody's or most guys' radars that he could be the next guy. it seems like a pretty fair deal for the Seahawks. Reset the quarterback room, got younger, got a little cheaper. What's your thoughts about Sam being the starting quarterback, and how do you look at him? A lot of, like, Bryce and I look at it like a bridge quarterback, still a possibility to draft a guy this year. What are your thoughts on the signing, and also, does it change anything as far as getting that next guy? How are you viewing Sam Darnold here for the Hawks?
I was so afraid they were going to end up with Aaron Rodgers. I think I would have been happy had they signed Jameis Winston. I'm not kidding you. Like, I had put on social media, I was going to hold myself to it. If he was a starter, I was not watching a single Seahawks game that he started. I was not going to do it. I watch every other team in the league. I was not going to do it. And that is a personal reason. It's also I just think he's a bad quarterback for bad football. And I just couldn't do it. And I know we're supposed to be, objective. Nope, not when it comes to him. Not going to do it. So anyway, but so at first when they signed him, I was so relieved. And then I was like, it's fine. I don't think that's anything to be too excited about. I don't think that Sam Darnold's going to come in and change the franchise or anything like that. He played very well for the most part in Minnesota last year. And I know people talk about those last 2 games over and over. Okay, but if you look at the whole body of work, he was a good quarterback. He had amazing weapons. Don't we all wish we had Justin Jefferson? But at the same time, I think that he did his job very well. With that in mind, I don't think it really changes the trajectory of this team needing to get a quarterback at some point. I don't know that this is the draft for it. I just don't. Now, you can take a flyer on a kid, right? But that's not what John Schneider does. He doesn't draft quarterbacks. Will he this year? Maybe, just to appease people, especially if this offensive line stuff keeps happening. Yeah, he's not getting anybody. But at the same time, I think that it would make sense. You bring in, a kid in at least the second or maybe third, just bring someone in just to see how they do. You know what I mean? But I think bridge is the best word for it. Now, is that what Sam Darnold wants to hear? No, but you got a 3-year contract, dude, that can get out after 2. That's just what he's going to be. So it's a bit of a prove it. It's very close. I think everyone has said it's basically the Baker Mayfield contract that he had. And so now we've switched back over, and we'll see if he excels and can play the way he did in Minnesota and can really help turn this around under Kubiak, who he knows, which I think is a huge plus, right? Then I think that it's a fine. Now, I usually say fine is a 4-letter F word and doesn't ever mean fine, but I think that this is a fine sign. It's fine. It's nothing to get too excited about. It's nothing that we think is going to be transformational, franchise-wise, but it's not going to hurt, I don't think.
The way I look at this, Dayna, is what you've done is you realistically have kind of inadvertently kicked the can down the road, potentially at the quarterback position in a way, because you've reset, like, the quality of quarterback you're getting is very similar from what you lost in Geno to what you're getting in Sam Darnold. Like, yes, in some aspects Geno's better, in some aspects Sam's better, and it's kind of a wash. What you're getting is a 7-year reset in age is what you're really getting with this deal of Sam Darnold only being 27 turning 28 and Geno going from 34 to 35.
Sure.
And so what it looks like to me is what John is doing. And I agree with you. Like, there are some quarterbacks to kick the can on this year in the draft and take a flyer, whether it's a Kyle McCord or it might be, potentially Quinn Ewers if John has his conviction about it. I know it scares you, Dayna, but it's a reality. There's just too many connections there not to ignore it. Jackson Dart, maybe he falls in the second round and they take a swing on him. So it gives you that flexibility to do it. And like you said, you can get out of it in 2 years and it's not that bad of a contract. You're not taking a massive dead cap hit, but you've also still allowed yourself to be competitive. Your offense doesn't fall flat on its face with Sam Howell in the game potentially, which, bless his heart, Sam Howell tries, but I see a drastic drop from Sam Darnold to Sam Howell.
Yes.
So it gives you the ability to still be competitive to a guy that knows the system. A lot of these coaches that they brought in know Sam Darnold and have been with him at different stops. So it leads you to think there is a little bit of a plan here. It doesn't mean that, and this is where some people go, oh, this is terrible. Like, Seattle's committed to this guy. It's like, no. What Seattle has done is they've reset their quarterback room a little bit and given themselves a little bit of flexibility with it, and not given themselves a more guaranteed deal potentially to what they would have had to give Geno to keep Geno around and make him happy,
Mhm.
which I think you would have seen a higher guarantee number. That's what Geno was really looking for, was I want more money in my pocket, where Sam's looking, I'm trying to cash in and potentially get another deal in 2 or 3 years that I can then cash in on again. So you basically just reset back to 2022 Geno Smith when we took the deal when he first signed in Seattle. That's what you've done. And I'm okay with it. I'm happy. I think everyone's terrified he's going to turn into New York Jets Sam. I don't think he is. I think there's too many abilities and weapons around him that they will eventually provide him with in this offense that he'll be able to do well. But I don't expect him to come in and light the world on fire and all of a sudden become one of the top 5 quarterbacks in football.
Right.
So
It's fine.
It's fine. It's a good move that allows you to stay competitive in an NFC West division that currently is in self-destruct mode unless you're the Rams.
The dumpster fire in San Francisco. That's a whole other conversation.
And they even lost out on Bosa's brother today.
I said even he didn't want to play in San Francisco. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, the interesting thing about this is exactly what you said. They just pushed the clock back a little bit. And so they cannot be reliant on this not stellar quarterback class, right? Now, I do think that Dart is a little interesting because I think he is developable. I think he's someone who could pull what Love had in Green Bay. You could sit him for 2 years, have someone, have your coaches coach him up, get him to where he needs to be, and then maybe he would be really good. But if he's not, you're not hurt by it either. You still have the options of other things. All we can do is hope that John Schneider changes his viewpoint a little bit, because he struggles with this, drafting these quarterbacks, and just realize that developing a quarterback is not a terrible thing. They lucked into Russell Wilson for so long. There was a stat, somebody put it out, that Seattle, I can't remember, it might even been Mookie, I can't remember who it was, but someone said Seattle has not had a number 1 pick in a quarterback, or had a new quarterback in like 20 years that was a number 1 pick or what, it was very interesting because they had Russ and they had Hasselbeck and they had Tavares and they have like all these players that they've just brought in. At some point you have to prove you can develop a quarterback. And so Agreed. I think that maybe this year, possibly next, everyone's like, we're tanking for Arch Manning. No, because you're going to have to develop Arch Manning too. And so that's just the way I remind everyone, Patrick Mahomes sat for a year behind Alex Smith for a reason. And I think that has been lost a lot in the last few, really 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, well, I think with Dart, I think Dart's a first rounder and even maybe a top 10 guy. So I don't even know if he's going to be there. Maybe. Rob Staten has got him at number 2, which is crazy, but he's got him over Shador, and the hype gets real. It's like with Penix last year, right? Like you remember before his pro day, he was projected like a 3rd rounder, and then he ends up going 9th. So
do you know that's one of my favorite draft moments ever? So I was at the draft and I'm in the press room, and they have TVs everywhere. We're waiting for the players to come in, and they announced that Penix was picked by the Falcons. The place exploded. They were cheering and screaming. It was crazy. It's seared into my brain. It was so crazy. But you're right. Especially the closer you get to a draft, these players all of a sudden start moving right on up those lists.
I gotta say too, I mean, he's got the look going down. He's somebody you could potentially market. It plays into it, right? We can't sit here and say it doesn't, but I'd love a guy like that to sit. I think this would be a good opportunity too with the bridge with Sam, because then you can sit at least a year. And then, if he's just setting the world on fire, then start him whenever you feel like to start him. But, as far as that goes, few other guys, I know you want to talk about John Schneider, and, we'll get to that. We'll get to that because there's definitely some things to talk about.
I'm going to pop in here. Dana, the quarterback name you were looking for the last first round guy that's taking a snap for the Seahawks, Trent Dilfer.
There you go.
Trent Dilfer was the last first round quarterback pick of, at any point to take a snap for the Seattle Seahawks that had first round pick.
Yeah, and now here's Darnold. But no, it's good. I think it's going to be good. I think Bryce and I both were saying that the deal is good. It keeps you competitive, and like he said, it resets with the age, And I think it's there's so much more to go, right? So we'll see what other pieces he puts around him. But on the defensive side of the ball, you mentioned real briefly about the guys you're fired up about. Obviously, Ernest Jones, was a staple when they brought him back. But what do you think as far as, are they done? You mentioned Ernest and Jaron Reed. Are they done with free agency on that side of the ball, or what do you think? What else do you think they need before we focus in on the draft?
I think they might be done. And the only reason why I say that is because the draft is so deep on the defensive side of the ball this year. And so they could really get a few missing pieces out of the draft and save that free agency. Now, if they don't think that some of the players they like are going to fall to them, maybe that will change. But I really feel like they got the couple of guys back that they wanted. They let the ones that they didn't want go. And so there are some holes to be filled, but God, the defensive players on the draft are just so stupid good this year. I think that would be a really easy fix, especially, they got a couple more comp picks today, the ones they expected, but we got an extra fifth instead of a sixth. That helps if you need to move up to get to somebody, obviously. But I think that if they signed another defensive player in free agency, the fans' heads would explode at this point, because they need to focus on the other side of the ball. But I think the draft is so good. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, let's sit pat, and we'll kind of go from there.
So I love the resignings, Jones, Job, Reed,
Job.
bringing those guys back, listening to how Jaron Reed in the article John Boyle wrote talk about how it's like walking out into his backyard and playing football, being in Seattle. Like, he's gone out before, he's come back, realized this is like home. He's going to be like one of the LOB guys that I think is going to stay in Seattle once his career's over. The Ernest Jones deal might go down as the steal of free agency, the way it's structured and everything. Like, as much as we will talk about John Schneider, he does have an ability to get those type of deals done. And you kind of look at it and go like, how were you able to get this player at this number and the way that it's structured? The one thing I'm going to be interested about with the defense, and I think there could be a potential splash coming on the defensive side before the draft. And because of the draft capital Seattle has and how many pieces like they already have on this defense that are young, Albert Breer reported that Seattle, when they initially talked to the Raiders, tried to get Max Crosby. I think there is a void that they may see in their edge group because they don't know Chenna's durability. Obviously, we've seen him struggle. Boy Mafe is a good player, but he's not, I think, someone that you can bank on being a great player. We still have to see another year of Derek Hall. So when you look at this edge group, you kind of go, is it really like, it looks more of a weak point in some respects, this defense, or an okay point than some of the other places on it. I wonder if Seattle doesn't call Cincinnati and try for Trey Hendrickson. Bring in a guy that's 30. Yes, you'd have to give him a new deal. You do have the cap space.
30, though. Yeah.
But do you go and get a disgruntled player, which we've done before in Carlos Dunlap? He's a bit older. And that way, if you go and get that, you are now bringing a guy that is a elite pass rusher that I think would fit, and Mike McDonald would have ways to use, and we know it. But now you're not banking on Leonard Williams and some of these interior guys to get your sacks. You now actually have a true edge presence. And I wonder if that's maybe something we see. And like you said, Dana, it may cause all the Seahawks fans' heads to explode. But
no, I think they'd be okay with that signing.
They'd be okay with it, but I think they'd look and go wrong side of the trench, like get the lineman.
Right.
But sometimes you got to go make a strength even more of a strength. And if you can add to this defense and give Mike McDonald another piece, why not try and go that way? You do have an extra second round pick that you didn't have before. And that may be what it takes to get him out of Cincinnati. It's just an idea, but it's
I don't think it's a bad idea either. I really do like this edge class for rookies, but they're rookies, right? So you don't know, right? There's nothing proven there, and they can just, maybe rotate them in. And I say this all the time this time of year. The beauty of the Legion of Boom defense was the rotation they had, right? That was why it worked for so long. They could rotate those players in and out. And no one was overtired. Rarely were they hurt until toward the end. And so I don't think it's a bad idea. It's not like the defense is perfect. We know that they have holes. They know they have places that they have to fill and they have to get better. And so I would not be surprised if they did that. I just don't know if they'll make it a priority with the type of defensive draft that they have right now. But I certainly, I love the defense. I wouldn't balk at it at all.
Yeah. Hey, Dana, speaking, about the fans' head exploding and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
far, we've seen some offensive linemen available and being signed by other teams. And, now, especially with the huge names that are no longer in this building, that
Mhm.
fans were like, okay, well, now the next domino to fall is automatically the offensive line. Let's sign two guys now, right? Like, why not? Look at all this money. Easy to say, right? But what's your confidence level now with John doing anything other than what he's done in the past as far as bringing in a free agent for this O-line?
John Schneider's seat has been hot for me for a year. But at the same time, Mike McDonald came in, did so well. I thought, oh, he's bought himself some time. He got the right head coach. Good for him, right? Like, I got it. I have two schools of thought, so I'm sorry about that. But one side is like, are we still in the was it Peter, was it John situation, kind of a Brady and Belichick situation? And I think that John, I think that's a crazy argument because I think their working relationship was wonderful, and that's why it worked for so long. But I do think that we have seen these patterns from John Schneider that he swears he doesn't have, but we know that he does, right? And if he continues this offseason to follow those patterns of not paying offensive line, not putting a priority on that line, and not looking for young talent and quarterback, I think that there will have to be a change made at the end of the year. I don't really care if they tank and get the first pick, it doesn't matter and that will definitely get him fired. But even if they win 8 games again, I think that 9 games again, you can't, right? You can't, because everything you said you're going to do. And then they just came out with an article. I think it was the Seattle Times just this evening that he's like, this offseason will make or break the rest of my career. And that's really what it is. It's time for him to show that he's not stuck in a box. And I think that all of us really feel like he has parameters he will not get out of. And it's insanely frustrating to me. I really struggle with I've never been an NFL scout. I've never been an NFL GM. I don't know what goes on in the inner workings, but it seems the thought process is really baffling to a lot of people who do know those things. And yet at the same time, we're at the combine. You listen to any radio, you talk to any of the talking heads. John Schneider's one of the best in the league. He's one of the best GMs in the league. He does everything great. He's so well respected. So then I think, is it just a fan skew that we're not getting what we want, but the rest of the league sees it? I don't know. But I think at the same time, at some point, you have to admit that he has missed the mark on just these certain things time and time again. And he has to be held accountable for that at some point. He promised that we would get offensive line, right? And that hasn't happened. But we also need to, I do want to give him this. We have to remember that these players get to make these decisions. It's not just him not saying, no, I don't want him. They can offer till they're blue in the face. If someone doesn't want to come play for a guy who said O-line doesn't matter, I don't really blame them. You know what I mean? Or if they're in a better situation, or they're closer to family, or they're already have a house in that city, whatever it may be. There could be a million different things. But I'm hoping that at some point you have to have some veteran leadership on that line. They need it so desperately. So I think that he has to at some point throw money at somebody to get them to come. I just don't know that he'll do it.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting because now you look at this offensive line group. Will Fries, who I know most of the people, when they see this, are going to be so upset that he's not a Seattle Seahawk and John's failed. And, Aaron Brooks is now a Green Bay Packer. But when you look at what you listen to, a lot of the NFL expert analysts, Daniel Jeremiah, and a lot of these guys have all said about this entirety of this free agent class was it's not very good.
Right.
It's not a good free agency class. The NFL draft has been more touted as a meat and potatoes draft of you want trenches talent, this is where you need to go do it. For me, when I I talked with Ryan this morning. I've talked with Dan Viens. I've talked with a few other people about, this whole missing out and we're not getting an O-lineman. We signed Sam Darnold. We got all his cap space and so on and so forth. If John Schneider walks out and say he signs Tevin Jenkins tomorrow, and Tevin Jenkins is the guy that they bring in, I don't look at that as, okay, he did something different, but I don't want to hitch my wagon to a guy that struggled on the Bears offensive line that they just got rid of and didn't want to re-sign. I'm going to judge John Schneider on what he does in the first 2 days of the NFL draft.
Yep.
That's where I'm judging John Schneider's offseason. If this turns into you traded back and you missed out on a Tyler Booker, or you missed out on one of these top O-line prospects that could really come in and help you, that's where I'm going to go, okay, what are you really doing here? Like, I'm not going to fault him if in the first 2 days he takes a quarterback. Okay, finally, you did that. That's something different. You've never done that, John. Great, good job. But I also don't want to see it be where he takes a swing on like a receiver in day 1 or day 2. And I'm like, okay, you could have got this receiver draft. We talked about it. Like, you could have signed an Elijah Moore in free agency. Like, we can figure out. Fix the biggest glaring need, because if you can't protect Sam Darnold and you can't get a run game going, it doesn't matter what you have on the outside, as we've seen for the last decade. It doesn't matter. You just shipped off your number one receiver. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So if John has a bad draft and doesn't address some of these needs, that for me will be more damning for him than I think anything else, because given the coaches that they have brought in the Rick Dennisons and the John Bentons and Kubiak in his system, it all has a pretty good track record of developing O-linemen, turning them into, a functioning above average unit. So that's where I'm going to bank on. Okay, John, you went out and got these guys with Mike McDonald. Hopefully they can turn Christian Haynes around for you. Hopefully they can make a Jalen Sundell or a Lamea a decent player as well. And you can fill, if you don't get that, the guys that you draft fill those voids for you, because tackle, he's drafted okay. Charles Cross, Russell Okun, Abe Lucas, Alvin Bailey. Like, he's had some good hits on the tackle position, but it has been a complete, utter vacant black hole of doom when it comes to the interior O-line ever since they traded Max Unger. And Max Unger wasn't even his guy. That was a guy from before.
Yeah, for sure. It's and that's the whole point, right? It's the repetitiveness of it. It's the hitting your head against a brick wall repetitiveness of it. And I think that's where the frustration in the fan base lies, is that we know this defense has been turned around and we're thrilled with what's going on with the defense. We get all of that. But the O-line has been a problem since Russell Wilson was drafted. And then they'd have a couple of good years, but they were never great, but they were better. And then they'd fall apart again because you'd let someone go in free agency. You wouldn't keep them or whatever it was. And I think that's it. It's the repetitiveness of the constant holes unaddressed on that offensive line. And then for a couple years, it was defensive line too. And we were like, wait a minute, you can't get either side of this right anymore. Fix the defense. So now truly your sole focus. Yes, you need a wide receiver. Yes, you need, probably another tight end. And this tight end class is fantastic. So go get one at some point, that sort of thing. But if you don't fix that line, I think that the fan base will be screaming for his head.
How I agree. We've talked about hot seat. We've used that word quite a bit.
Yeah.
We talk about Jody Allen and what kind of owner is she? We don't really know her. She's not really in the spotlight at all. The only reason why you know her is because she's Paul Allen's sister, right? That's pretty much it. We don't really know how she, is he on the hot seat? Like that. That's what I want to know. Like, how hot is this? Like, if he just has, like you brought up, another 9-8. And the same thing happens. Defense gets a little better, but we got holes here. The offense is whatever.
Right.
And we just go 9-8 again because, you bring in a guy like Sam, you feel like, well, we're going to compete, which could easily just be a 9-8. That's just where it's tough to call it, right? Because, I mean, like Bryce said, it's not a great free agent class, but you'd figure, like, we got to get somebody, like you said, a veteran, Ryan Kelly. I don't know, but that's going to be the interesting thing at the end of the season, I guess. But I mean, overall with John, I guess record aside, because you can bring in guys and things don't work out, but what would be, I guess, a successful offseason for him overall? If you would just like, is it just offensive line, or is it, you know, a few other pieces to sort of set this team up a little better? You talk about Clint Kubiak, and they did fire Ryan Grubb, so they didn't keep run that back again. But for you, what would be like just the stuff that John needs to hit on for you to be like, okay, I'm confident that in a couple of years we're maybe contending for an NFC championship?
So two things. I think that the whole thing with Jody Allen, I think that she doesn't always get credit for paying as much attention as I think that she does. We have to remember that she okayed letting Pete go. She knew that there had to be a change, and whoever the powers that be were, or maybe she's decided, you know what, let's just start with head coach. Let's see if that is what needs to change first. So she made that decision. So I think change is possible with her. I'm not saying that she's just, I mean, none of us want Jerry Jones as an owner, that involved, but at the same time, you want someone involved. So I think she's more involved than people necessarily know. And I've never met her, don't know her, couldn't tell you from personal experience, but that's just my get. When they let Pete go, I was like, okay, she's into understanding that we need to make these changes. Now for John, I think I sound like a kindergarten teacher, but I'm gonna say improvement at multiple positions, right? So I'm not saying that we have to even win the division. We could still win 8 games, but if statistically you look and the O-line is better, the run game is better, that, you have, and not because of the runners, because of the O-line. If you have more consistency out of your quarterback, if your defense can stop the run better, like all those measurables that were so glaring for Seattle in all these different spots, we call them the hot spots that they need to take care of. You can see improvement in that, much like we did with the defense. It still wasn't the best defense in the league, but holy cow, did they make some serious gains. I think if you see that, then that to me is successful, right? But then you have to see momentum at the same time. And so you get that success. All right, so these guys worked. So now we're going to re-sign Cross, and we're going to do this, and we're going to keep this rolling. And we need to add this little piece. It's that forward momentum that you see so many teams do. The Eagles are a great example of it. And I know they just won a Super Bowl, so they're easy to point to, but it's true. The way that they run that organization, it's that forward momentum. They have problems, they have issues, they have to go and fix, and then they fix them and they get better. And then there's that forward momentum to the next year. And I think that that's somewhat of the issue, is that they'll have momentum and then they stop. And then we have to retool something else again. And then we get momentum and then we stop. And so I know analogies suck, but you know what I mean? So I think that that's what I would look for personally for improvement, that John has figured out how he needs to do this. And I do lay the majority of it at his feet. I know that coaching was an issue last year with Grubb. I totally agree with that, with the offense and that sort of thing. He wasn't the one picking the O-lineman. And so I think that this has to come, it has to rest on John's shoulders.
The big thing for me is I think John's going to get to finish out his contract, which I believe goes to the 2027 draft. As far as I recall, is when it ends, is the 2027 draft is like the end date of his contract extension. What I think may have occurred with him and Jody, because I do think they know each other quite well. And like you said, Dana, she is involved to a point, is I think when they decided to move off of Pete, I believe in speculation that John got given kind of the same mandate Jerry DiPoto, and this is something I've used in past shows. When he came into the Mariners, he told he had to win with the roster, try and win with the roster that was currently there. I think John got that mandate. Look, we'll bring in the new coach, Mike McDonald, and that, but you need to try and win with the players currently on this roster and see if it was just a coaching thing that was really holding them back. And I think John sold her on that. Like, look, I'm going to bring in this. I'll try and win with it. But if it doesn't work out and we have the same result, I get to retool this in a new way with the new coach. Defensively, they made the acquisitional changes in midpoint of the season. They kicked out their linebackers, brought in guys that we both know Mike wanted. He wanted an Ernest Jones. He wanted him in the offseason. The Rams wouldn't give him to Seattle. And then you had Therese Knight, who he drafted. He handpicked Knight to be one of his linebackers.
Mhm.
Then you saw the defense take off. You saw things change from a defense that was up and down to a defense that was quite effective over the last stretch of the year.
Mhm.
I think what he's getting is John's getting the opportunity now with Mike to remodel this offense the way Mike wants it and make this truly Mike McDonald's team, not Mike's team on defense and kind of the remaining peak guys on offense. Like you are fully getting this. Now, if it falters this year and goes extremely bad and they only win 4 games, I think 100% there is a real conversation John Schneider gets fired. If they end up being 10-7, 11-6, and get a wild card berth, I think John gets another offseason. But I don't think it's a guarantee.
And
John
he would
gets
deserve
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think John gets a contract extension out of 2027 unless Seattle truly makes a playoff push. Like we're talking like on the cusp in a close divisional game or makes the NFC Championship. I don't think you'll see it unless that happens and John gets that in the 2026 season, going into that 2027 off season. I don't think you'll see a contract extension given to John Schneider. I think it'll be a changing of the guard if it's another, 10-7 season and they miss the playoffs. Okay, you got to one wild card round, big deal. You haven't been back to the NFC Championship game since 2014.
Right. The only thing, and I want to ask you guys this question, is that this kind of blew my mind because I guess I wasn't really paying attention. So 10 free agents last offseason, not one of them's on the team.
Yeah, that was a really bad free agency.
Horrible
We've talked about that a few times.
Oh, okay, sorry, but I was just
I just mean like
deserves-
you bring it up
Yeah.
and because we noticed it too.
Yeah, I read it and I was like, oh my God, they're right. And so, I mean, that's not a great sign for him.
Well, a couple
Maybe
guys didn't even make it past what one guy didn't pass week 5 or something.
Yeah, no.
Like,
Well, let's
failed
be
on
honest.
all
One of the DBs he drafted didn't even make it out of camp.
Well,
DJ
yeah,
James.
yeah,
he didn't even make it out of camp.
So yeah, I think that, and that's the confidence where you lose confidence, right? That's where none of us trust. I said, I was on Blue Sky and I was talking to a friend who is a Rams reporter, and I was like, he was like, you say you don't have confidence. I said, would you? I don't know that there is a place to have confidence right now. And he has to earn that back. And that's this offseason. He has this offseason, I think, to earn that back. They were complaining about, the fans not showing up and they were selling their tickets to away fans and all of this stuff. Well, you know what? Put a product on the field that they can root for. Get them a player that they can get excited about. Now, people
just got
love,
rid of that guy.
Yeah, exactly. But they have players that people have. But oh my gosh, now you got rid of the 2 longest. Tyler Lockett is the most beloved player I think, this team has had in next to Marshawn Lynch in years, right? And so it's like, and now he's not there. And someone's like, asked me today, oh, do you think they'll bring him back? No, they gave him the farewell. He's not coming back, And so now you have to give us others for the.
I want to
to
ask
be
one thing
engaged
to you
in.
before we move on here, Dayna, about that. Do you find it interesting there has been no sort of farewell or anything to Geno or DK?
Well, they traded him. Like,
Yeah,
They-
trade is a little
but this is the
different.
thing I'll say. Like maybe it has to wait for the league year to actually start and they'll do something.
I don't see it.
But given other guys that they've had this situation with in the past, things have come out a lot quicker than they have in this case. I'm just saying, I'm not saying there's anything there. I just find it a little interesting that like nothing has really been said. Now it might be because it has to actually be
League
the
year.
league year and
Mhm.
everything for it to roll over to finalize everything. But it's just something I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting in a way. Like
Yeah.
nothing's been said or done really. And those 2 guys were very important to this team for the last 5-6 years.
I do think it has to do a lot with the league year, to be honest with you. I think it has to be finalized, but things happen. I mean, we've rarely, right? But things can happen. So I think that they have to technically wait till they're off their roster. But are they going to get a full day like Tyler Lockett
No.
did? Absolutely not. No, I don't. I think they'll get a thank you. They'll get a highlight reel.
That's what I
They'll
was
move
looking.
on,
Yeah, that
and
kind of thing.
and that'll kind of be the end of it. And I think it's because the thing is that we didn't know if Tyler Lockett was going to retire or play one more year. And I don't know that they knew that. You know what I mean? But at the
Tyler
same
might
time,
still not even know that.
yeah, fair, right? And so
I think he would have played, don't you?
I think it
I
was
don't know
Especially
if
for
it's
that.
Seattle.
He
I
might
don't
be
know
one
that
of
he
those
would.
guys that's a late training camp signing kind of. I don't think like the
Oh,
only
you
team
mean somewhere else?
Yeah, like
yeah. I don't. Man, Vegas maybe.
I think he'll
That
go. I think if he plays anywhere, it'll probably be for
that would
Pete.
probably. Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't know. And maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he's like, I don't know. It's going to be worth the money. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things when you get to the end of your career, right? Like I was shocked Bobby Wagner resigned again. It's like Bobby's going to play forever, right? So, but at the
I
same
think
time,
Bobby's trying to get himself into the top 3 linebackers of all time at this rate.
God.
Well,
Bobby's
also how
number one in
close.
my
Look how close to a Super Bowl Bobby just got too. I mean, that team is balling.
I know.
So
They're
if
so
they
fun to
weren't good,
watch.
maybe it'd be a different conversation, right?
I agree. Yeah. God, I love watching them play. They're so fun.
Yeah. I mean, no, they're a lot of fun. I mean, you look at the going back to the. I'm gonna get to the draft prospect
Okay,
first in a sec,
let's do it.
but real quick, we could do a whole show on the whole debate of fans selling their tickets and where the 12. Like it for me, it just again comes down to, like you said, product and star power. And right now they
And
have
winning.
well, that's product,
Yeah.
right? Product
Yeah.
and star power, which currently, in my opinion, they don't have any. Your
They're big.
JSN, like he's like I'm talking stars, right? Stars. And they just don't have it yet. So I mean, again, unless they're winning with this roster, like 13, 14 wins, expect the same thing. And the ticket prices and the fact that you can sit at home on your 80-inch TV when it's raining and 35. You're
No.
right. But again,
It's so true. It's so true. And
there's a lot that they
they
got to
can't win
compete
at
with now.
home.
Well,
They couldn't win at home. And so
I've
it's like,
seen,
why bother?
yeah, I saw a comment. What was it from a guy who basically said he was at every home game this year and it was the worst experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you have
Yeah.
to look at that. So, but moving forward, Dayna, you were down at the combine.
I was.
Talk about that. How was that experience? And obviously you're down there, boots on the ground, firsthand. Talk about the experience down at the combine first off, and then who really kind of stuck out for you, and then that stuck out for you as well. That might be a nice little fit on the Seahawks.
Yeah. So the combine was so fun. I love going to the draft, right? Like I really enjoy the draft. I think it's super fun. I think that it's like Christmas morning for NFL players, but it's changing because not as many players are going anymore. And so I think that that's really different. But the combine was great. It was so nice to kind of talk to all these players that weren't in the first round. And because at the draft, all we get to do is talk to first round draft picks. And so that was really fun. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to talk to other media people too. So yeah, it was really, really good. I really liked a couple of players. One small school player I really liked was Zoff Frazier. He's from UTSA, small school kid, super, super nice cornerback, tall, lanky, looks a little bit like Sherman. I just thought he was just great. He was super fun. And then there were a couple of defensive ends that I really enjoyed. And then some tight ends. There's one tight end. His name is Robbie Untz. I think his name is. I don't even remember what school he played for. But I read a quote about him right before I interviewed him that he has a junkyard dog mentality, that he enjoys a really good hit better than a score. I'm like, I want you on my team. Like and he would answer questions with one word. He didn't want to be there. He just wanted to go hit somebody on the field. And he was the guy that Rich Eisen was having and Daniel Jeremiah were having such a good time watching during the field drills because his mustache was so cheesy. I loved it. I love players like that. That's what I'm talking about, like a spark and somebody that, you can get a personality behind. It's so good. But there were so many really good players. Unfortunately, I wasn't there to talk to the tackles, the offensive tackles, the offensive linemen. I had to go home a little early for my daughter's birthday, but I was so sad about that because I really wanted to get a feel for those. I call them the Iowa farm boys, right? Like that's who you want to go talk to, are those guys. But I really think that Seattle should focus this draft. Obviously, you need a high level offensive line player. They're there to be had, and they will be around. And if you want to move up a little to get the specific one, whether it's Booker, whether it's Simmons, whoever it is, go up and get them, whatever. But I really was so impressed with the defensive end group there too. And I think that's why I was a little hesitant, because I think that there are some really good players there for that. And then the tight end group. There's so many you could hit on in that. You could throw a dart and just hit on a kid. I think that they're really good, but it depends on what kind of player you want. If you want the blocking kid like Robbie, because I just freaking love that kid, or if you want, someone who's more of a catcher. Although I think Barner really kind of came up next year. They obviously are keeping Noah Fant, which I honestly thought would be a casualty this offseason. So I was a little surprised that he was there. I'm not mad about it as much as other people are mad about it. I think it's fine, but I think it'll be interesting to see him in a different offense. But I think if Seattle needs to focus on anything outside of the offensive line, I think this edge rusher group and tight ends are huge. I know people aren't super excited about the wide receivers in this group, but I think there's a few gems in there, especially some good special teams player, maybe, that sort of thing. But I think there could be some kids that could be developed in there too. But really, that end and tight end group is kind of my favorite right now.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, Dana, with, this draft class and how Seattle maneuvers and what the quality is that they get, because now obviously with no DK, I think there's still a chance Noah Fant maybe gets released and they maybe bring him back, but on a different deal, but maybe they don't. I really think they're going to lean into AJ Barner and this tight end group too. I'm very interested by the tight end group. There's guys I like it, Mason Taylor. There's some other guys that I really like in this group, just because with this offense that they're going with, tight end is such a focal point. Now, with that being said, there is one free agent. I'm going to just preface this that I think could really work in Seattle, and I'd be so okay with. And that would be if Seattle somehow found a way to get Kyle Juszczyk up here. He's such a mismatch. He's been released by the 49ers now. And so I wonder if there's a potential that he comes to Seattle, because we heard Clint Kubiak say he's looking for a fullback, H-back type. You could probably get him on a cheaper deal than necessarily, you don't have to pay top dollar potentially. So, but like there's other guys. There's Harold Fanning Jr., there's Gunnar Helm. There's so many guys in this tight end class where you go, yeah, I can pick him. I can plug him in. I can play with him. There's one defensive lineman, though, that I think is getting forgotten about. And we had Brandon Kane on, and I wouldn't say like totally forgotten about, but I don't think he's getting necessarily the hype he would have got if he came out last year. And that's Mykel Williams out of Georgia. He had a down year this year.
It was a great interview.
And from everything I've heard, he's a great kid. He's a good guy. He's definitely someone I think would be a fun chess piece for Mike McDonald. And I think someone that has slowly slid down the board just because he had an injury-plagued year. But the year before, he was talked about being like, hey, this guy could be a top 10 pick. Like, he's one of the best players on the Georgia defense. He's a guy that I think maybe, like you were talking about, this edge group is really interesting. He's a guy at 18 that I think could be a guy for Seattle, where then now that they have 2 second-round picks, can come back around and get 2 offensive linemen if they want to in the second round that are still going to be guys that could be starters, like a Donovan Jackson.
I'm going to look up really quick this kid's name because I butcher it every time. His name is Olufemi, and it begins with an O. Dang it. Can't remember. Oh, Oladejo. Olufemi Oladejo, a UCLA linebacker. Okay, so talked with this kid for 9 minutes. And we only get 20 minutes with you. He took up my whole entire segment. They're expecting him to be, he was a third round. They figured third round. He's moved up to the second in most now. He changed from linebacker after like just a couple of games last season. They moved him to edge and he loves it. And you could tell he loves it by the way he talks about it. And this kid, I said this on the Our Turf podcast, he has Bobby Wagner brain. Like, he was so smart. He was breaking down some plays with some of the guys and had these deep, really in-deep conversations. I like this. But that's his linebacker brain. But you mix that with an edge rusher. He said what he loved about it was that before he had the green dot, he had to tell everyone what to do, and he's making sure everyone's in the right spot. And when he moved to edge, the ball snapped and he could just go hit somebody. And I was like, oh, but he was so smart, smoked, so cute. So I think there's players like that further down in the draft that you can help get some of that in too. Williams, though, he's still on DJ's top 50. I think that people really like him too. That's my whole point with this defensive group. And I don't think people think I'm just obsessed with defense. I am, but it's so good. But I think that even as good as they are, they cannot ignore that line, and they need some help with offensive weapons, whether it's a fullback where now really Kyle, he's kind of old now. I'm surprised that you're all in on him, but a great player still. But yeah.
I just think he fits the system and he alleviates pressure if you bring in, like, again, say you bring him in, you draft another young tight end. AJ Barner was only 21 last year. He's still young in his own right.
They're babies.
They're babies. They really are. And you bring in a guy that's a veteran that you can move, that knows the system, so it'll help with coaching it up to a point. That's when you get some of that value. Like, if you look at the Seahawks, their oldest starter on offense this year going into the season is Noah Fant at 27. Like, that's how young they now are. That's where, to me, it's like, if you get a Kyle Juszczyk, you bring a guy that's an established veteran in this league, that's a professional. He doesn't have to move that far from San Francisco up to Seattle. He's playing in the same division, and he knows the system really well.
And wouldn't that just be a 1-2 for 49ers fans?
I have a better proposal for you, Dayna. My dream situation right now,
ready.
and we'll get to this because we'll wrap this up. But you bring in Kyle Juszczyk, and you bring in Cooper Kupp.
I mean, I'm cool. I'd actually wouldn't mind having Cooper in here.
I wouldn't either. I think that's
I think
he comes in,
Cooper
knows the system. Jake Peets is here, who he was with in the Rams.
He can still play, I think.
And that's the thing. He could. You take those two guys and say, hey, 2 times a year you can go stick it to the guys that cut you.
Yeah.
They might want to do that. You never know.
Hey, Dayna, just a couple more minutes here, but are you heading down to Green Bay for the draft this year?
I am not this year. Kate is going to go and cover it for us this year. So like I was saying before, the draft is changing, and it's, you don't get near as many players anymore that come because, they have these paid parties now, and great, get your money. I'm all about it. But so it's kind of lost some of that. And yet you still get that. I love that feeling of these guys. They got their teams and they're so excited, right? I love that. But we try and rotate events, and so it's Kate's turn to go this year. So she's going to go since I was at the Combine too this year, and then next year I think I'll be at the Senior Bowl and the Combine. So then I think Sonia will be. So yeah, we try and rotate that, but it's her turn, and that's fine. I've done the last 5, so.
Yeah, no, awesome. I mean, Detroit, Detroit looked awesome last year. So
Detroit was great. Kansas City was so great because I could go home and sleep in my own bed. That was amazing. But Vegas was even pretty fun. So yeah, it's fun. It's changing to more of a fan event, I think, than actual opportunity to talk to people. So.
Yeah, that's true for sure. Definitely a spectacle. Dayna, it's been awesome having you on here. Like, just time flew. Before we get you out of here, what do you got going on? And where can everybody find your stuff?
So Our Turf Football, we're on all major social media, Blue Sky. We're still on X. We have all of those. And we do our podcast. We're in the off season now, so we space them out just a little bit more, just so that everyone can get a little bit of a break. But we still do them on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And so you can watch for that if you like and subscribe. It'll always tell you when you're on. And then come around the draft, we'll be on every week for probably about a month, just going through different draft prospects. And then I still do Real Hawk Talk with those Hawk Blogger boys on occasion. That's on Wednesdays, but it's whenever there's news, like you guys, you feel like every 5 minutes you're doing a live pod, right? So I do that there too. So you can always find me. And then on social media, I'm at Dayna OG on all of them. So you can find me on any of those.
Awesome stuff, guys. Make sure you go down and subscribe to Dayna's channel, and all that will be in the description down below. So awesome stuff, Dayna. Always awesome having you on. Always a fun conversation and great insight. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the future here.
I'm sure we will. Thanks for having me, guys. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Dayna. Hey guys, that was Dayna O'Gorman once again on the show. Basically a friend of the show now. We've had her on a bunch of times. Just always interesting insight. She's either down the draft or this year she's down the Combine, and it's a great to have her on and just get her insights on different stuff. Talking about prospects at the end, man. It was cool. She got to interview some of the guys and really kind of get to know some of the guys that she's like, hey, there's some players that might fit the Seahawks pretty nicely here.
Yeah, no, exactly. Dayna's always got great insight from the draft perspective and just overall from the Seahawks perspective and where she sees things. She's well connected. And, she's right. There is a hot seat now for John Schneider, and this offseason is going to be a make it break it for the guy.
Yeah, no, it's true, man. So it's awesome having Dayna on. But guys, awesome episode tonight. Make sure you go down, subscribe to Dayna's stuff. Make sure you go down and sub to our channel, HawksZone Rundown. We're also part of the Field Goals team now. So head over to fieldgoals.com. That's where you're also going to find our podcast, and you're going to find a lot of great content over there as well. So guys, head over there. And we got Chris Clough coming up tomorrow, and that's going to be another great episode. Chris is a friend of the show. So that's it for us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.